r/AskReddit. What's your favorite book you've read and why? Circe and the Song of Achilles by Madeline Miller. I'm a fan of any Greek myth interpretation or retelling, but the way that Miller portrays and gets inside the heads of characters that have existed for thousands of years is incredibly unique and powerful. These books do not have to be read together as they just share a world, but would highly recommend both. Though just a side character in both, her Odysseus might be my favorite. East of Eden. I learned a lot about people and why they are motivated to do the crazy things they do. I also learned that there are people who are just straight up rotten. Can't be fixed. I think it's chapter 3 where he describes Kate as a monster, comparing that some people are missing an arm or a leg. Kate is missing something in her mind, which makes her evil. Contact by Carl Sagan, about a radio astronomer named Deli Arroway who discovers extraterrestrial life. There was a movie too which is also good, but different enough that I think the book is worth reading. I feel like I still read a lot, but I don't have obsessive favorite books like I did when I was younger that I read and reread a million times and underline favorite passages. But Contact came across at just the right stage of formative years for me and showed me the kind of astronomer I wanted to be, and I'm now a radio astronomer who specializes in transient radio signals that turn on and off over time. No aliens yet though. The Red Wall series by Brian Jacques. I love the adventure and questing and figuring out riddles. The way he described the feasts, God, I always wished I could experience a feast like that. The way he would write the different dialects for the different animals was so much fun. They are young adult books, but I'm nearing 4 decades and still love them. Been reading them since I was just a wee lad. Eulalia. For Ed Wall. Edit. Wow. I just woke up to see that this has blown up and I'm just overwhelmed. Thank you all for the love and awards. So many replies. I was trying to respond to some, but I'm just too overwhelmed, a blubbering, weeping mess. Tears of love and joy, I assure you. Just know that I'm at least reading every last reply and weeping with joy at how much love there is for Mr. Jacques and his works. The Left Hand of Darkness by Ursula K. Le Guin really shows how much possibilities there can be in sci-fi genre. It's not always just spaceships and lasers. It talks about a completely separate alien culture where the concept of genders do not exist and the different societal norms that come with it. It goes into some more stuff too. The premise of the story is very intriguing and it's very well written. Hatchet by Gary Paulson. I love the story of survival and perseverance. I have read this book many times in my life and have referenced it throughout my lifetime. I'm now a social worker and I work in a psychiatric hospital, and when I do my groups I will ask an icebreaker and have the patients tell me their favorite book. After that I'll give them this book, tell them what it's about, and use it as an example to continue on in life, to push through adversity and never quit. The Giver by Lois Lowry. I know it's 5th grade reading material, but it was really my gateway to how books can transport you to a different world. I know they made a movie about it, which doesn't do the book justice, as it often is, but damn. I really love that book. My second choice would be The Wind Up Bird Chronicles by Haruki Murakami, or anything from Haruki in general. Just fantastic novels. Stephen King's The Stand. It's big and intimidating, but the story is so good and written so well I found myself wanting to savor it. The story and world change throughout the book. I'm excited to leave it a few more years so I can read it again without knowing quite what is going to happen. Edit to say, going to stick the recommendations based on this to my to-read list. Cheers for them. I came to voice an opinion and have come away with a lot more. The Hobbit by J.R.R. Tolkien. I think it epitomizes what adventure novels should be. Reading it as a child I believed I was really there with him and Gandalf and the dwarves. It sucked me into a world outside my comfort zone, just like Bilbo. When you read Lord of the Rings, which are a close second in my favorite books, you have a far more serious story with catastrophic consequences for the book's characters. But in The Hobbit it has themes of consequences like this, but the story is about Bilbo's adventure. You can also read into the book however deep you want to. As a kid I read it for the adventure and world building. As a young adult with a better sense of literature I can see the genius and intricacy of Tolkien's writing. It's got things for everyone in it, for all ages. After I finished my second reading I gave it to my granda, and he loved it as well. Also I like the lore. Edit. I figured I'd say this too. When Peter Jackson strayed from the path of adventure to that of battle and the world-ending conflicts that made Lord of the Rings great, he strayed from the essence of what made the book so great, and that's where the Hobbit trilogy falls short. Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban. The reveal of everything in the Shrieking Shack is so brilliantly conceived. Harry Potter has always been as much a mystery series as it's been a fantasy series, but Poe had the best mystery of them all in my opinion. Almost every chapter has an important detail about what has happened / what is happening that can be so easily overlooked, yet it all fits together well and makes sense in the end. Ironically, it's for this reason I hate the movie. It's clear the movie makers were counting on the fact that you read the book and completely glossed over many points of the mystery that made the book so good. If you've only seen the movie, I highly recommend reading the book. A lot more things will make sense, I promise. It certainly did for my parents when I explained everything to them. American Gods from Neil Gaiman. I read the book years ago. Awesome. Because it has lots of surprises. And it contains the biggest and the best stories of the world, mythologies. Because the mythologies are not made up by one man. They are product of thousands of people. It takes the book to a different level. My main language is Turkish, and I'm improving my English to read it in its main language. I think then I can fully have the joy the book can give me. Les Miserables by Victor Hugo. I read it when I was 12, and it marked me. I just loved it. The narrative is so compelling, the characters so real and relatable, the plot is so amazing. Jane Valjean's life is truly amazing. Cosette, Merio, the Bishop, the Thénardiers, Javert, all of them can remind us of types of people we know, yet their narratives feel so unique and deep. 10/10 would recommend. The Time Traveler's Wife by Audrey Niffenegger. I'm a sucker for time travel stories at the best of times, but it's also comfortably my favorite fictional romance, as well as having some of the most beautifully lyrical prose. Henry and Claire are such a sweet couple dealing with what are truly exceptional circumstances, and the ending, yeah, it's a tough one. But the fact that it hits me every read through, and I've read it at least 10 times, is proof to me that it's a classic in the making. There's also a HBO series in the works with Stephen Moffat as the showrunner, which I could not physically be more excited for. Never Let Me Go by Kazuo Ishiguro. I remember enjoying reading it, but when I finished it, I didn't think it would become my favorite book. However, I found myself thinking about it pretty much every day for the next year. I then stopped and thought, if a book has made me stop and think about it so frequently for such a long period of time and so much more than any other book, then how can it not be my favorite book? I found the story so warm, but so painfully sad, and the ending just absolutely destroyed me. It was a crazy ending which was worded so beautifully and was set in a beautiful place. I live in England, and I do this weird thing where, if I'm driving down a country lane and I see a beautiful field, I will stop the car and go out and look at it for a while. That is exactly what the main character was doing when she remembered her friends and considered her fate. Seriously, it utterly destroyed me. I have read a ton of books, but there are 2 books that I always come back to. The Outsiders by S.E. Hinton and Children of the River by Linda Crew. The Outsiders is a beautiful tale of struggle, friendship, and a will to survive beyond outside influences. Ponyboy cares so deeply about everything, and often feels the pain of others. Johnny is tough, even though he is vulnerable, kind, and going through stuff in his home life. Dally is cruel and mean, but takes care of his little brothers when they need it. 2-Bit is one of my favorite characters. He laughs in the face of life. He keeps the group on their toes, and is so damn likable that not even the socks can be angry or hate him. Overall, the story is beautiful and a representation for the way things are. Things are rough all over. Children of the River is about a young Cambodian girl, Sundara, She is trying so hard to fit into a world that isn't made for her. She is constantly struggling with the pain of failing her family, losing everything in a war, and the agony of starting over, but trying to stay faithful to the old ways for her family. Her struggle for this balance is hard and often mind-boggling because of the sheer balance she must walk. Her aunt wants to maintain her Cambodian ways and bring her children up in the old style, while everyone around her is adapting. In the end, Sundara follows her heart and gets to find the balance between the old and the new life. The Witcher series. I enjoyed reading the Witcher saga. It spins a rather intriguing tale of segregation, injustice, and xenophobia, of politics and love. The last book of the series and the ending was kinda disappointing, but whatever. The journey mattered to me. You can read it without any foreknowledge of the games in the Netflix series. It's a great standalone experience. Come for the fighting and swearing. Stay for the heartbreak and morality. The Devil in the White City by Eric Larson. It's about H.H. Holmes, America's first known serial killer, and how he used the first World's Fair in Chicago to lure his victims. What I really like about it is that it's a non-fiction book written in a fiction format. He's telling the story and weaving the narrative of how the fair was built in with the story of H.H. Holmes, but his research is so thorough that every line of dialogue is directly quoted from first-hand sources like diaries and letters. Utterly fascinating. Dune. The character development and world building is unparalleled in the world of science fiction. Such an amazing story, and it pulls you in right from the beginning with the Bene Gesserit witch putting Paul's hand in the pain box. Arthur C. Clarke said it best, it is only comparable to The Lord of the Rings. A true magnum opus of human imagination. I became obsessed with it. I highly recommend the documentary Jodorowsky's Dune if you enjoy the book before the movie comes out, and to read the book if you want before the new film comes out as well. The Count of Monte Cristo. A lot of people tend to focus on the revenge aspect of the story, but it's really a tragic story for almost everyone involved. Every character is believable, and often with their own complexities, and the plot constantly has you trying to figure out what the Count's final plan really is, before he pulls the trigger in a biblically devastating way. I even loved the parts that most people seem to dislike, such as Rome. It really is just a perfect novel. Catcher in the Rye. No other book has so accurately captured the machinations of a disgruntled teenager's mind. I've read it 5 times and each reread helps me understand my teenage self more and more. This book is polarizing because it was written in the voice of a very niche market, the socially ostracized teenage male. It's a small subset of the population and most people can't identify with it. When we had to read it in high school, most of the popular kids thought it was whiny and unrealistic, while most of the social outcasts and nerds identified with it on a visceral level. I have always and forever loved the Percy Jackson series of books. It was the series that really drove me to read as much as I did. It was the first long-running novel universe I fully indulged in, and all the characters were handled really well, which is a huge pet peeve of mine as books. There is no damsels, because each character is tough. Annabeth is a great example. Smart, cunning and shown multiple times to be an even better warrior than Percy, minus the curse and such. Sheen Anasty Sliddard. It was so beautiful, really is a wonderful book that shows what magical realism is. I not only love it, but grown up living it. I remember my amateur stories about witches and wizard, and the stuff we do to prevent them, and that always weird stories. My mum and her herbal and ancient medicine for everyday issues. I remember when I tell a friend about my mum's best friend who cannot longer cry with tears, and how she told me it was because she cried too much on her life, so she ran out of tears, and he told me, that is straight out of Macondo. I'm just love that little spice of magic that you can put on life. Book would be Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas as it's wild, and allows me to reflect on my own psychedelic experiences without having to use them. Favorite series is the Enemy series. It is realistic, it's a zombie apocalypse, but with a twist. Instead of starting at the beginning of the plague, it starts after there have been settlements set up, and people have gotten used to it. Other thing is that it's a disease that strikes and infects everyone 16 and up. So it's kids fending for themselves against adult infected. The other major reason I love the book is that different groups of kids call the zombies different things, including adults, crazers, if I remember right, lunatics and more. Another reason is there's a character called Shadow Man that tracks a horde of adults and studies them, trying to figure them out and trying to figure out what he can do to stop them. Oh, and there are many characters with so many different personalities, everyone speaks in their own dialect. It's seriously such a good series and I highly recommend.